Thanks for joining me today. My name's Jo and I'm an independent Stampin' Up demonstrator based in the UK. This is the card we're going to be making for today's Monday mashup. So I'm using a really cute little set called Back on Your Feet. Now this has been with us a little while, but it's just one of those really cute little ones that's really great for giving somebody a little pick up, or if they've been poorly or something like that. The images are really cute anyway, so you could use them for lots of other things. It doesn't have to be for that purpose. So I'm using that today. I'm going to be using this little turtle or tortoise, I think. I'm not sure which really, but anyway, I'm using this little character here, and I'm going to be using this Hope You're Back on Your Feet Soon. And I'm mixing it up today with the lovely Forever Flourishing Dies. Ooh, couldn't get my teeth around that one. We're just going to be using this little one here. And then also I'm using our rectangles stitch dies for the greeting. So they're the two that we're mixing up today. So you're going to need, first of all, I've used two of my most favourite colours and they absolutely go beautifully together. This back one here is Pretty Peacock, and then we've got Granny Apple Green for the other pieces here. So they're two of my really favourite colours and they look absolutely stunning together. They're really bright and cheerful. So this is Pretty Peacock, so this is my card base. I'm based in the UK, so we're using a standard A6 card size. So this is a full length of A4, which is 29.75 centimetres by 10.5 centimetres wide. And then it's scored at 14.85, which gives us our card base there. You're also going to need a piece of Pretty Peacock again. Now this is just half a centimetre smaller than the front of our card. So this measures 14.35 centimetres by 10. And then you're going to need a piece of basic white in exactly the same size. So that's 14.35 by 10. This is actually going to become our insert. I haven't actually made an insert for this one yet, but I will do once we've completed this. So they're the pieces we need. We're also going to need a piece of Whisper White, or basic white now. I can't get my head around calling it basic white, to actually stamp our tortoises on, and also a scrap of the Granny Apple Green to cut out our leaves and also our greeting. So they're all the pieces you're going to need. So what we're going to start off with is to do our background first. So I'm going to put the card to one side. So I want to create this background here. Now I've done this using our blending brushes, but you could use sponges, you could use daubers, whatever you're comfortable with using for blending colour basically. So what I wanted to do was create a darker border so that it stood out very slightly from the background card, but also sort of drew your eye into the centre of it really. So we're going to start with that. So I'm starting off with Pretty Peacock. Okay, so I'm going to be using our blending brushes today. You can use a sponge or a dauber or even our brayers, whatever you're comfortable with to add colour to your base. So I'm just going to pick up some of the ink and I want to basically build this up really slowly. Now, the blending brushes are good for this because it takes a while to build up that colour. It's really soft, so you get a really sort of more of a subtle build up of colour. So just persevere with it for a little while and you'll suddenly see that it will start to turn the colour that you want it to. We're using tone on tone colour here, so it's always going to be a slow build up of colour. So I'm just working in sort of circular motions just to build up that colour. Be careful if you don't touch the ink pad that you don't put your fingers on your actual piece. So I'm putting a reasonable amount of pressure onto my brush, but not too much that it sort of is too harsh. I want this to be quite subtle at this stage. Now if I held this up against the original card, you can see it better how it's starting to come together. It's quite difficult to see it when you're actually working on it, sort of how much the colour is sort of blending in really. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop with that colour for now, and I'm going to bring in Misty Moonlight this time. And I'm just using a smaller brush for this one, and I'm just going to literally go around those edges. So I'm not going as far in, I just want to add some depth to the edges so that they really stand out. And then what I'll do is I'll go back with the Pretty Peacock afterwards just to blend that colour in a little bit further. So I hope you can see now that's starting to really give you that depth of colour. This is a great technique for creating sort of skies and backgrounds for things like Christmas cards. They work really well with, so it's a really nice sort of technique. Okay, so you can see I've got a lot more depth of colour in there. Just gonna, a little bit more at that end there. Okay, so again I'm just going to bring in, again this is some of the Pretty Peacock, just to blend those edges so that we get a really nice covering. Okay, so once you're happy with your depth of colour that you've got on there, what you need to do next is to, we're going to create our background. So if you look at this one here, I've got little sort of blobs, for want of a better description, and I've also got some of these white specks. So we're doing two things here. We're going to start off with, I'm using one of our water painters, but if you haven't got one of these, you could just use a normal paintbrush with some water. You want to make sure that your tip is quite wet, so I'm just going to squeeze some water so that I can see that it's almost dripping. And then what I'm going to do is just tap it onto my background. Now you'll find at this stage you don't really notice much going on other than a few blobs, but you'll see once that dries that it actually it leaves those watermarks, which is what we're looking for. So once I've done that, I'm then going to use my same brush, and I'm going to pick up some of our Frost White ink, which is this lovely pearlized ink, and I'm going to do exactly the same. So I might be a little bit gentler with this one, just to try and get a nice mix of some bigger blobs and some little blobs, and just to give a nice background. You don't have a huge amount of control where it goes, so you just need to sort of be a little bit careful, but it looks nice because it's meant to be a speckled background. So okay, so now I've done that, I'm going to pop that to one side so that can be drying. And I'm just going to quickly wipe down my desk of all the ink and splodges. Okay, so I'm just going to also wipe the tip of my brush just to remove any excess paint that I may have on there. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is to actually do our tortoise. So I'm going to stamp him twice, and I'm also going to stamp him a third time on the inside of my card this time. So this is my scrap piece and my inside, and I'm going to be using Memento ink because I'm using Stampin' Blends today. So I just need to make sure I'm using the right ink so that it doesn't bleed at all. So if you were using StazOn ink, for example, because it's alcohol based, it will mix with the alcohol, so you just need to be a little bit careful. And I'm just going to pop him inside my card there, and I just need to stamp 2 of him. And the reason I need 2 is because, can you see I've cut his legs out to give him a little bit more dimension. So it's actually only his legs I need this time, but I always stamp a full image, because if one stamps better than the other, then you can choose which one you want to use. So as I say, I'm using Stampin' Blends to colour him in. So what I've done is I've used 3 sets. So I have Just Jade, Granny Apple Green, and Crumb Cake. I wanted to use Just Jade to give a different green. So rather than go completely with all the peacock colour, I wanted to give it more of a greeny colour. So this is why I have gone with Just Jade. Okay, so I'm just going to actually cut that off so that I've got less to work on my desk. So I'm going to start off by colouring in all the little squares on the body. So I'm starting off with the dark Granny Apple Green. And where these sort of little hash lines are, that's going to be where my shadow is. So that's the darker colour. So that's naturally the underneath of wherever you were looking. So the underneath is always going to be darker. If you look at anything on your desk or anything, you'll see there's always a shadow underneath. So the hash marks are there to guide us really. They're really sort of helpful. And then bringing in the light Granny Apple Green. And I just want to concentrate on the joining point just to make sure that I don't have any harsh lines here. I want those to be really soft. So just blend those together. And then what I tend to do is I tend to go back in with my dark one if it's lightened it too much, because sometimes when you blend it can sort of disappear too much. This isn't too bad actually, but I will just go in and just add a touch. And because you're already blended, you'll find that your next layer will go on so much better and it will naturally start to blend itself. We'll give it a little helping hand in a second. So again, just on those edges, just want to soften them just to blend them through. Okay, so I'm going to do the same again on the one that's going on the inside of my card. Okay, so now I've done that, on the base here, I am actually going to just, we cut this part off on the ones on the outside, but I'm just going to add some green to the underneath. I'm not going to blend these too much, they're just literally like a shadow underneath. So that's those done. So now I want to come in with the Just Jade. So I'm going to be using the dark one throughout for the bottom of the shell here. Just realised I haven't done his tummy, have I? I'll do that in a moment. Okay, so I've used the dark throughout there because there's not going to be creating too much of a shadow. And these sections I'm just going to do some little shadows where it meets things like his leg. And then I'm going to blend it with the light one, just so we get that sort of shadow. And again, just try and blend the two together so that we get a really nice sort of finish on it. And again, if you want to go back and add a little bit darker again, on those sections you can. It's all about layers, so just build up those layers and then you'll get the depth in it. So that's that one. Let's do this one quickly here. So now I just need to do his tummy. Notice I'm not doing anything on this one because all I want to do on this one is these two little front legs. So I don't need to do anything further on there. So I've gone back to my granny apple green and I'm just literally again following these sort of hash lines where the darker colour is likely to be. So just use them as a guide. They're really helpful for if you're not sure where sort of shadows will appear. And then again the light one on top. Just want to add plenty to get that to blend properly. And then I'm going to come back in with the darker one again, just on this bottom area. So there we go. So that's that one done. Just quickly do this tummy. Okay, so you'll see it naturally dries lighter once it's actually dried through. So you do get more of a contrast once it's dry anyway. And then finally, I'm going to be using crumb cake. So I've got light and dark once again. And again, look out for those little hash lines. This is our dark area. And around his head. And then going to bring in the light one and again just try and blend those colours together. Not too worried about these front ones because these are going to be covered up in a moment. Well, actually no, this is the inside, isn't it? So these won't be covered up, it's on my other one. This is the insert. Okay, and then again, I'm just going to add a little bit more dark again, just to add that interest. So you will notice the second layer blends a lot easier anyway. Okay, I'm just going to use the dark one just to do his toes. Okay, so that's going to be for the inside of my card. I just need to finish these ones. Now these are going to be covered, these two at the front, so I'm literally just going to give them a one coat all over. I like to still colour them because if somebody's looking from the sort of side view of a card, you still get to see what's underneath. So I'd like to just colour them with a flat colour just to so they coordinate really. Okay, as I say, the only two things I need to do on here are his two little legs. I'm just going to go put down on his shell a little bit there. I'll explain that to you in a moment when we actually cut them out. Okay, and then just a little dark bit for his toes again. Okay, so that's all our colouring done. This can actually now go inside my card, so I'm going to do that now before I get anything on it or cut the wrong one out or something like that. Okay, so that's just going inside. So now I want to concentrate on the front, and you can see this is all drying nicely. It's nearly dry completely. A couple of little blobs here are still a little bit wet, I can see. But you can see it gives that nice sort of shimmery sort of look background to it. So now what I want to do is to cut out my tortoise. And I'm actually cutting it on the black line this time. So I'm not leaving a border. If I was using a white background or a light background card, I probably would leave a border on it. But because I'm using it onto a dark card, I like to remove all the white edges. I just find that it gives that nicer finish. It gives that sort of the contrast of the darker colours we're looking for. That's it can be a bit harsh if you leave them white. And I can just see I haven't coloured his toes. Let's quickly do those. So you have to be a little bit careful, especially when you're cutting around things like his toes, but it's not actually too bad, this little image. Okay, so that's him cut. Now what I need to do is just to cut his little legs out. So on this one, you may recall that I coloured part of the shell here. Now the reason for that is that we're actually going to make a little slit in our shell, and we're going to actually tuck this leg behind because it's partly coming out of the shell. So what I've done is I've included that little section, and that's just going to be our little bit we're going to tuck inside. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to just cut the rest of the foot out first. Okay, so where this, so where this section is here, I'm going to cut right up to that join there. So this is like a little sort of wing piece, and I'm just going to just level it off. So I've got this little wing here, and I'll explain it further to you in a moment. So I just cut the other one out. Okay, so that's my two legs. So now what I need to do is I need to attach these. So for this one here, I just use a little bit of dimensional, and I mean a little bit, so just a little tiny bit that I've cut off here. And I'm actually going to use my tweezers just to pop it onto. You might find it actually easier to stick it onto your actual image itself. So I've got a little bit of dimensional there, and then I'm going to add a little bit of Tombow just to the other end, so that when I attach this, I want it to obviously line up, but I want that section to lay flat, so it looks like it's attached to his body rather than sort of being up in the air. I hope that makes sense. So I'm just going to hold it there for a couple of seconds just to make sure that it sticks down nicely. Now for this one, I'm just going to bring in my cutting mat. So what I want to do is to cut a little slit in the actual shell itself. So where this leg goes, I want it to look like it is coming out of the shell. So I'm going to cut a line from this point here, just beyond the actual edge of the leg there. So it's just a little slit, And I'm just going to pop my tweezers in there so that you can see. So I've got this little slit that's running just here. So what I'm going to do is to take this leg here, and I want to slot that little wing part into the slit. It is a little bit fiddly to start with, and once it starts coming through, I find it easier just to pull it from the other end. Now he looks like he's got a double leg at the moment, but that's fine. We'll just pop it out of the way. I'm going to add another little bit dimensional to the bottom section of his foot. So here, I'm going to peel the back off of that, and then I can readjust his foot to fit in where I want it to fit. So there you can see. So what happens is it looks like it's actually coming out of the shell as opposed to actually sort of being stuck on top, if that makes sense. So it gives it more of a 3D effect, and makes it look that much better. I'm sorry if you heard tapping feet then. That was my dog just walked into the room. Always manage to do it, don't they, when you're live. So there we go. So that's how I got those to look like they're actually coming out of the shell. So if I move that out of the way, so we're not far off being done now. So what I've done is I've cut 2 of the leaves. Now, as I say, these are from the Forever Flourishing dies. So it's this one here that I've used. So I've just cut 2 of those out. And what I also did was I, with the sponge that had the pretty peacock on, so I didn't re-ink it at all, but I just, on the edge of these leaves, just at the bottom, so there's not much ink left on this brush, but it's just sufficient just to give it a little bit of the peacock colour. Stops it being so harsh, so it's not all just green, it has got a mix of the colours. Okay. So they're going to sit underneath him in a second. So I need to do my greeting. So that's what you need, a piece of scrap of your granny apple green. I actually quite like him laying at that angle. That's quite funny. I think we might do that with this one. That was a bit of an accident, but it does look quite funny. So I've got this. I hope you're back on your feet soon. And I'm just going to make sure it's nicely inked. Especially as it's going on to a coloured background, because you just need to make sure that you're getting a nice sort of covering. So that's fine. So then I'm going to be using the rectangle dies. So I used this second one here, I believe. No, I didn't. I used the smallest one. So I used this one here. And what we're going to do is we're actually not cutting the full piece. We're actually going to be cutting off one edge, but I'm going to cut it as a whole to start with. So let me just do that. Okay, so this is our grease in here, which we're going to pop over here. Okay, so the next thing I did was I actually attached some of our linen twine just to that side. It was just to pull in the colours from the crumb cake, really. So what I'm going to do first of all is I like to add some glue just to the top edges here, so that when I wrap my thread round, it will actually sort of grip it. So I'm just going to add some of our stamping seal there, just to give it sufficient to pick up that actual thread. So this is our linen thread. So I just want to make sure I give myself plenty to actually play with. So I'm going to tie this on first, and then what we'll do is we'll slot the actual greeting underneath in a moment. So if I just pinch it on those edges where that glue is, it will just hold it in place for me. Okay, and again, I want to give myself plenty to to tie with. I've got more than enough that I need there, but I just wanted to make sure that I had sufficient just to hold it in place. So now that I've done that, I'm going to actually add my greeting. So what I want to do is just to position this so that it gives, I'm going to lose that edge on it because I want that to be straight, but I'm going to stick it at that edge. So I just quickly add some glue. So I'm just going to lose that edge just a little bit and pop that down. Okay, so I'm just going to trim off that extra from the reverse. Now also, when I'm actually sticking my thread and actually gluing it to it, I tend to use a little glue dot. Now I find these really helpful for just holding it in place, and what I do is I tend to roll it. So I roll it into like a little cylinder almost, and then once I've got it there, I can just stick it where my bow's going to be. So this will be hidden. I can just pop my little linen thread onto it. It just holds it in place, just makes it that much easier to tie your bow. So I'm going to tie it into a knot first, and again at that stage I'm going to push it down onto my glue dot. So now that is going to hold it in place. It just makes life so much easier. And then I'm going to tie my little bow. Let's say I've got more than sufficient thread here, but I would rather have lots to play with rather than not enough, because there's nothing worse than trying to tie a bow with not enough ribbon or thread to hold it in place. So once I'm happy that that's the right size and the position that I want it in, again I would just push it down onto that glue dot, and again it will just hold it sufficiently for you. Try not to pull the end as I just did there. That's better. Okay, so I'm just going to again push it onto that glue dot, just make sure it's sat where I want it to be, and then I can rearrange my tails of my thread here. I kept them quite short there, but perhaps we'll go a little bit longer this time. Entirely up to you. And I tried to just twist it just to stop it sort of covering the actual greeting too much itself. But I think it all adds to it really. Okay, so I'm just going to carefully lift that because obviously that's attached itself to my desk a little bit there. And now I want to add some dimensionals. So I actually added these just so it gave it another dimension without adding a border. And you don't need too many. I just tend to do 3 along the long edges, and then I do 1 each in the middle. And that just gives it support, so it's not actually going to cave in on itself. Okay, so very carefully, I'm going to hold this up to do because it just makes it easier to line up. There we go. So that's now all done. So the next thing I'm going to do is attach my little green leaves. So all I did was added a little blob on each of the leaves just to give it enough. You don't need too much. They're not heavy or anything like that. And I created like an arc. So it's like a sort of arc just going down. And so we're going to put him on a different angle this time, because I quite liked him sort of at that angle rather than completely upside down. And again, I added him with dimensionals. Again, it just added that little extra lift. Just going to use a little bit off the edge for his head. Clear the decks a bit. These things I find all over the house. the dog usually gets them attached to her, and there we go. So as I say, I'm just going to put it so it looks like he's putting his hand down just to steady himself there. Okay, so just give my desk a very quick wipe to get rid of those extra bits. Okay, so this is our original one. This is our new one here. As I say, if you want to sort of adjust your towels on your bows, you can. And then finally what I added was these little hearts here. Now these are from the Snailed It set. So these are little resin hearts. They do have a tendency to ping if you're not careful, so just be careful as you lift them. Oops. And oops, there we go. There's one, just, oops, there's another. Found that one. So yes, just be careful. They do tend to ping off. I found them all, so we're good. So that's my 3 hearts. So there we go. That is today's Monday mashup. I hope you like that. It's a fun little card to make. He is super cute. I love him. So yeah, that's really good. Oh, one last thing I did do actually, and I just haven't shown you properly. He's got a little glass eye. So what I've done is I've used our shimmery crystal effects. And then I've just squeezed it onto his eye. It's a bit cloudy when it goes on, but when it dries, it's completely clear. So I'm just going to quickly twist it around. And then what I generally do is just give it a little tap from underneath, and that just sort of gives it that beveled effect. It's quite gloopy, so it will hold its shape for you. So that's it. That is today's card. I hope you like that. As I say, it's a little bit of fun. You could do the same technique and have some flowers or something like that if you wanted to. Basically, any imagery you want to, you could use. But I think the dark background just sort of sets off that lovely bright granny apple green. I just think it's a really lovely colour. So thanks for joining me today, and I will see you next week for another Monday mashup. Take care. Bye.